Anvil, Hammer, Hatchet podcast.
Welcome to Anvil, Hammer, Hatchet, the podcast where we explain all of life's little questions in about an hour and a half. With me today are my co-hosts, Army Armstrong. Oh, that's right. Army couldn't make it today. Apparently, there was some complications with colonic. I didn't get into details. Tubes were stuck. They wanted to keep him for a couple of days to make sure everything was okay, but that's all right because at least I'm here with my other co-host, Big Daddy Ross. The boss is boss. The man with the plan who knows where to stand. Thanks, Ross. Thank you for being here. Oh, that's right. Ross isn't here either. Apparently there was a relapse in the 24-hour syphilis that he had a couple of weeks ago. So as far as I know, they've got him on a bag of antibiotics, and they're giving him regular cream and ointment dips to try and make sure that gets cleared up. But I do have a guest with me in the studio today. It's an artist that I'm an extremely big fan of. I've known him for a long, long time. It's Low Grit. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Very excited to be here. This is my first podcast.
Really?
Officially.
You've never done one of these?
Nope. I listen to them all the time, but...
Yeah, I know you're a big fan of a lot of the same ones I listen to.
Yeah, for sure.
So since I don't have the other guys here with me today, I'm not going to be doing our signature segment.
Don't be CBA.
Which is the segment where we address all our fuck-ups from the week before, all the factual inaccuracies and mistakes that we've made. Can't seem to get by more than a week without having them, but we do need all three of the guys here. So we're going to skip that segment today and talk more about your career.
Because I could tell you all about my fuck-ups of last week, and there were plenty.
Were these work-related or just personal fuck-ups?
A little bit of both.
I do want to point out that the intro music that we normally come in with a song called Shark, which was an original that Army did. But today we came in.
He's the guy with syphilis, right?
Oh, no, he's the one with the colonic issues.
Oh.
Yeah. Big Daddy Ross is the one with the apparently reoccurring syphilis. So I really hope he gets that worked out. The track we did come in with, we normally come in with Shark. Came in with a different track this week, and that's an original track that you did, New Beatniks, featuring Cat Factor.
Right. And the actual original artist is Everyman. He's a hip-hop MC and performer from Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
I've been working with him the last few months as an executive producer on his new record, Good Deeds. And that was a track that I produced with him and Cat Factor. The record has maybe 10 or 11 producers and a bunch of guest vocalists and MCs.
Oh, okay,
Just
cool.
a straight hip-hop album. It's coming out March 25th, so...
Would you call it new school or old school hip-hop? I mean,
it's a little bit of a mix. It's kind of got a variety of the tracks are kind of like a more old school boom bap vibe, but then there's also kind of a heavy electronic influence as well. So there's a little bit more, there's some more modern productions in there as well.
Stuff that I've noticed a lot of people are taking basically an EDM feel and then putting lyrics over that, whereas those tracks are generally either sample based or have no lyrics. But it seems like there is a sort of a trend to blend those two styles.
For sure.
But I also kind of have seen, I don't know how recently you would call recent, but in the last couple of years, things seem like they might be swinging back to old school.
Oh, for sure.
You know, where there's more of a focus on flow and lyricism as opposed to a repetitive hookiness that a lot of things it seemed like things had really kind of gone in that way.
I guess it depends who you're talking to. You know, there's definitely a revival for the old school lyricism.
I mean,
I guess the caveat is if you're making music for the club or a festival, a lot of people don't want to hear about society's problems, and they just want to dance and have fun to repetitive stuff, which is awesome.
But then you got that. I guess lyrically, the thing that makes me feel like it's an old school vibe is the braggadociousness and the egoism that always made rap so cool. lyrics that almost sound like you're reading your American Express card receipt, talking about how much stuff you've got, like, I mean, or how badass you are. Even really mainstream artists like Kendrick Lamar, a lot of his lyrics are they remind me of like old school Compton lyrics.
Yeah,
of,
for sure.
Look at my shit. I got bitches. I will fuck you up. That's what I mean. The braggadocious egoism that people wanted to relate to that made like gangster rap so popular.
Right.
And that's going way back to the 80s. So I wonder if like Straight Outta Compton, like the film, not the album.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I heard it was great.
Oh man, it's fantastic. And Ice Cube's son playing Ice Cube does a great, what is it? O'Shea Jackson, I think is his name. Does a great job playing
That's
his
such
father.
a trip.
Oh, that his son is playing himself or playing him.
Yeah.
He does a great job, and the fact that obviously it's his son, so they look very similar, kind of draws you into the world a little bit more. Everybody in that movie did a great job, and I would definitely highly recommend it. And obviously the soundtrack is amazing.
Yeah. I was a big fan of Dr. Dre's release. That came out.
Yeah. Oh wait, which one?
Compton, I believe.
Oh, the one that came out like a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
It was actually really good.
It was really good.
And it had an old school vibe to it.
Totally. It also had a lot of modern elements and cool production stuff that you haven't seen from Dre before.
And a lot of
it definitely surprised me in a good way.
He also brought on not necessarily all the people from his usual stable, but he brought a bunch of current artists in and got them involved as well.
Right. A lot of the features were people I had never heard of, honestly, and I'm a little bit terrible at keeping up with new artists, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. It's hard not to be at this point. There's just so much access to information that
you get overloaded and kind of
get
shut
lost
down.
In the shuffle, man. They really do. But it doesn't really surprise me that you were into Dre's new release, because a long, long time ago, you were into his original big breakthrough when you were very young. Full disclosure.
It must have been like 9 or something.
Full disclosure, the artist Low Grit is a man named Logan Gritton, who I've known for 30 years because Logan is my brother. And so I've essentially...
This is fact.
You have not known me my whole life, but I've known you your whole life. So I've
known you at least half your life, though.
More than that.
Yeah.
More than that.
Yeah.
So I watched Logan as a kid evolve through musical tastes. And you were about probably 9 when you were really heavy into Dre, Tupac, Biggie, Bone Thugs. Yeah. DMX, I think you went through a DMX phase, didn't you?
I did, not as much as the other ones you listed.
Yeah, you definitely had a West Coast thing going on.
Yeah.
Although even Biggie is obviously an East Coast guy, but
sure. I think Biggie might be the only one on that list that I didn't really get into until later. I had a whole East Coast thing that happened after my teens, I think.
But even before that, I mean, even though you were that young at the time, hip hop and gangster rap was not the first musical scene even then that you had gravitated to. You had a more rock, punk, metal thing for a while, and you actually kind of blended the two. You didn't really pick one or the other. You seemed to always have a really eclectic taste, even as a young kid.
Yeah.
I mean,
go through phases.
Skinny Puppy.
Yes. Thanks to Chris. Chris introduced me to the industrial world.
And the Misfits.
And the Misfits.
Slayer, right? Yeah. So there was metal and punk and hip hop, all the things that a growing boy needs to form his mind and personality.
Indeed.
And
it was funny too, because when I was 8 or 9 and I was doing the Dre, Snoop, Tupac thing with the parents, it was fine. That wasn't a problem. It only the music thing became an issue when I started listening to Marilyn Manson, and that's when things got real and weird.
Which is to me, that's kind of funny.
It is funny.
That even though the music that had been accepted as sort of pop culture, acceptable pop culture at the time, like the hip hop stuff, even though that was way more of what I would consider to be a bad influence on a young kid than this sort of fictional, fantasy-based, completely unrealistic thing that like Marilyn Manson and bands like that were putting out there. That was the line.
Yeah, that was around the same time that was it Tipper Gore was making people put the parental advisory stickers on and condemning groups like Marilyn Manson as destroying the youth of America.
Well, that was a comeback of that. The original bout of PMRC push against the music industry happened a lot earlier than that in the 80s. Or maybe late 80s, but
yeah, it was already there by the time I was growing up. But
the bands that really got hit with that one was like Ozzy Osbourne,
Yeah.
Judas Priest, the heavy metal bands that they literally had them in front of judges questioning them about whether or not their music caused kids to commit suicide.
right,
And backwards messages on the, ridiculous. What now in retrospect seems like really ridiculous stuff. I do think that when the heavy labeling and the explicit lyrics thing started really getting out of hand was when gangster rap came
for sure
to the forefront of the music scene.
I was kind of, I guess, I came back. I noticed right at the resurgence of that. It was like around the time of Columbine, I think, around 99.
Right.
That was when I was listening to Marilyn Manson, and all those arguments and old issues were popping up back again.
Right. Because that was right after a phase where music had kind of gotten soft.
Yeah.
Not soft, but less controversial.
Right. Backstreet Boys, NSYNC.
Bon Jovi. Aerosmith was Aerosmith had like #1 record.
Yeah.
How dangerous is Aerosmith in the 90s?
So dangerous.
There was definitely a big resurgence of that due to, I think a lot of social things that happened. But there had been a phase where music really hadn't been considered that dangerous, even because that was post grunge, and kind of post Guns N' Roses. So even though grunge was like such a angry and rebellious thing or whatever, society never really seemed that scared of grunge. It was
right,
which is kind of weird because a big part of a big and unfortunate part of the grunge movement was a heavy drug scene. That because companies like Macy's were marketing the clothing, it seemed like the parents of those kids didn't even really notice or acknowledge that was going on.
Well, it's hard to notice. It's not, they weren't really like, it wasn't super upfront in the way that the rap or the Marilyn Manson thing.
That's true.
Yeah,
it wasn't in the lyrics.
Yeah.
It was in the culture, but it wasn't in the lyrics. They didn't sing about, although there were exceptions to that. Bands like Alice in Chains absolutely wrote songs about doing heroin.
Yeah. But that's one of those things you wouldn't know unless you were into them and like,
listening.
Yeah.
Right. That is very true. And all the gangster rap and hip hop stuff, it was very upfront.
Yeah. You listen to it for 20 seconds and you're like, oh, I know what this guy's talking about.
Right.
With Alice in Chains, you can put it on and, you might not
if you're
infer that much.
If you're not paying close
right
attention to the lyrics, it just sounds like another dude screaming into a microphone. So that is true.
Do you think that music as dangerous to culture is going to revive again? Because it's been kind of a dead issue for a long time, and I feel like music's gotten so safe for the most part, even amongst pretty fringe genres, that no one's shocked or cares anymore. I'm wondering if is that music just not there anymore? Do people?
Well, I feel like it's due for a comeback.
Yeah.
And there's music in a much more underground way that is starting to come up. I just think it's not quite bubbled to the surface yet, but those bands are out there. Examples that I could bands like Queens of the Stone Age are they're pretty unique and a different set. You don't hear other stuff like that's not mainstream rock and roll,
right?
But they're a successful band, and there's a lot of guys in that desert scene, that Palm Desert scene, that are still around and still making music and challenging the norm of what you would hear on the radio, like
right.
Bands like Caius and Fu Manchu. Well, Caius broke up. That was Josh Homme's original band, but like Fu Manchu, High on Fire, These Arms Are Snakes. There's definitely bands out there on an underground level that are doing challenging stuff in the same way. It's not actively being guided as a social challenge, but they're challenging musical norms. They're not sort of catering to the mainstream. So that's there, and we're definitely due. It's been since that Marilyn Manson era is probably the last time I would say that
like 18 years, 20 years.
That's a long time,
Yeah.
man. You know, and stuff got really homogenized.
Because after Mechanical Animals, I don't think there was any shock value left for him anyway.
Right, and then he had to start focusing more on the although they were always musically a really good band.
Yeah.
But
They're still good. I love their stuff. I go back and get all nostalgic and listen to some of those old records. I'm like,
he's working
it's really freaking cool.
He's working on a new one too.
Yeah. And I like the new stuff too, but it definitely doesn't have the shock value.
Like Deep Six.
Yeah.
I do too. But he's really having to sort of rely on his chops, his musical chops now, because the shock's not there.
Yeah. I saw a funny Onion article piece. I think it was from a few years back. It was obviously a joke and satire from the Onion, but it's like Marilyn Manson going door to door to, I don't know if it was conservative doorsteps or something, but basically knocking on people's door like, I'm going to shock you. And everyone's like, go away. Like, not bothering me.
Yeah, the shock's just not there.
Yeah.
Standing there and going, boo.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one.
After the third boo, it's not going to startle you anymore. But yeah, as far as I know, he's working on a new record right now.
And I think they put out a teaser of one of his new singles recently, and it was really fucking cool.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that are one of the people from that era that actually sort of stood the test of time. I know Korn's still a thing, but they kind of came, as far as I know. But exactly, the fact that that you're not even 100% sure shows that they're not really, they don't have the pulse that they did in the early 2000s when they were one of the biggest bands on earth. Obviously, your Limp Bizkits have gone away. Should I just say thankfully gone away? I'm trying. I don't know if yes, I'm glad there is no more Limp Bizkit. I'm not a big fan of Fred Durst at all.
I went through a phase where I liked Limp Bizkit. Could care less now. I don't even remember what their songs sound like.
Not good. Not good.
So probably not worth remembering.
The fact that you don't remember them kind of says it all. What was some of the other early 2000s stuff? Linkin Park. They're, as far as I know, they're not a thing. They were one of the biggest bands on the planet, and that just went away.
Never really got into that.
Yeah, the singer, because they have two vocalists. One's a rapper, one's a singer. Chester Bennington, I believe, is the guy's name. Actually ended up going on to sing with Stone Temple Pilots.
Interesting.
And did a decent job, I gotta say. I was a big Stone Temple Pilots fan for their first few records, and so I was gonna be a judgmental critic for sure. And he did a competent job. He was never gonna be Scott Weiland, but he held his own, and I think he's done with that now. I think they've kind of moved on.
That's cool though.
After Scott Weiland died last year, I kind of think there was going to be no chance of them going on as Stone Temple Pilots without him, which they had done for years. They had parted ways for years. But now when you think of that band, it just bums you out.
Right.
So you got to hang it up at that point, man. But back to what we were talking about as far as what you do musically. A lot of what you're doing right now is production and stuff, but that's not where you started musically, is it?
No, not.
I mean, what was the first instrument you picked up?
It was a guitar.
That's what I thought. Yeah. I had a pretty good memory of that.
It was electric guitar, but also I think I picked up a nylon acoustic too. I started doing lessons for classical, which I should have kept doing. I did it for maybe, seems like a long time, but it might have been 6 months or a year.
Feels like
I was reading sheet music.
Feels like such a waste of time when you want to play punk, and now in retrospect, you're like, wow, I could have really used this.
I could have really used it. If there's any young people listening, keep up with those things.
Piano, man.
Yeah, I would have done piano too.
Yeah, get your kids into, parents out there, get your kids into piano classes.
But after 6 months, I was like, oh, I'm just going to learn all the Slayer and Misfit songs and start a punk band and rock the fuck out, which I did.
Do you remember the name of your band?
No.
It was that long, you just don't remember at all? I do remember.
Might have been the Ghouls or something.
That sounds right. But yeah, you guys were,
I could ask some people.
You did the whole thing.
And we did the 7th grade school talent show at Aptos Junior High. I still have good friends with a guitar player from Stellar Corpses, Emilio Menzi, who I went to school with. Mm-hmm. They're doing great right now, by the way. But he always brings up when he sees me, he's like, man, this is Logan. he played Earth AD at the 7th grade school talent show. I'm like, oh yeah, we did that.
So that was the track. It was a Misfits track.
Yeah.
Awesome. I still love the Misfits.
Yeah.
They're one of them. Black Flag. That old school punk stuff is still like a staple in my like weekly existence.
Right.
And then so eventually you put down the guitar, and
Well, I didn't just put it down one day, but I was a skater too, and had a big group of friends. One of my close friends started making some beats on Fruity Loops.
oh yeah,
And,
I remember.
At this time, we were really into 3-6 Mafia and like really kind of a dark, heavy rap music.
Yeah,
and we started making these 3-6 style beats on Fruity Loops. I ended up getting a copy and started making some hip hop and electronic kind of stuff. And a lot of the people I showed some of my music to, they're like laughing at it, at how bad it was. And I was like, man, I'm just going to keep doing this. I don't care what you think.
practice,
yeah.
push for it, get better and better.
Yeah, so a couple years of just trying out different stuff. I eventually switched to Reason
Right.
from Propellerhead.
Now, but because you had a crew going, I mean, you guys were a crew of like 3 or 4 rappers. You guys were making beats. You were, I mean,
Yeah, so that was the point when I switched to Reason.
Okay.
That was when I met, or not met, but I was already connected with those dudes. But that's when we started the Boondock Disciples thing.
right.
Just like,
Which you weren't just producing and doing beats on, you were rapping on that as well.
yeah, I was doing a couple vocal parts here. I was writing raps.
If I'm not mistaken, that's where you got the moniker Low Grit. That's when you started using that, right?
At that time, I was using the moniker The Enthusiast.
But then that evolved into Low Grit, the Enthusiast.
Right.
And that I remember that because I remember a track, with the first track where you dropped that name on it. And I was like, all right, he's got an artistic identity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's who he is from this point on. And that's how it stayed.
Indeed.
I mean, you know, that was kind of when your artistic persona was really sort of the foundation on that really settled.
Yeah.
And you've been with that ever since.
I am kind of, I do have a small tinge of regret of letting go of the enthusiast part of it, because I always liked that name, but I don't know what
it had a flow.
Yeah.
But, well,
Might bring it back.
I guess as a vocal artist, it's easier to sort of lean on that type of a more lengthy name. But as a producer, you know, it's generally
That's part of it too.
something that's a little more reserved.
I think at that time I was still using the enthusiast when SoundCloud was coming out, and then you're like, oh, there's like 20 enthusiasts with different spellings on here.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. Maybe I just do Low Grit, my nickname.
There's so many other things to consider now in the age of technology that we live in. When you're coming up with a project name, you have to figure out how many of 144 or 140 characters is that going to take up, because you don't want to take too much stuff up on too many characters up on Twitter.
Right.
You know, or Instagram will only let you go have X amount of characters, or you know, there's marketing things that you really do have to consider that people never had to consider.
Yeah, or if
before.
there's there's
sure,
companies.
I'm sure Delve the Funky Homo Sapien would have probably chosen a shorter name if it was in the age of Twitter when he came up with it.
It's true.
You know,
it's true.
But that, you know, it's a different world, and marketing is a different world. It's rare that labels will put you out, really put you out there. So you got to do the groundwork yourself.
Right.
And social media is obviously a big part of that for artists that are working right now. And that's the world you're in now. As a producer, you're working with these up and comers who are trying to get a leg up, and the way that they can push themselves forward is completely different than it was back in the day.
Oh, totally.
So your world is all about that stuff now.
Definitely. It was interesting. So after that first hip hop group, Boondock Disciples, fast forward 2 or 3 years, and that was when I met the guys from Vibrant Iris, which was the first real serious project I became a part of.
Yeah, I mean, and that was a straight up legit band.
Yeah, we went through some phases for sure. It was 4 or 5 years.
Had a live
but
drummer.
that was right at the time, right before dubstep and electronic really had
kind of taken hold of that.
It was kind of in the midst of it really taking off and becoming the sort of thing where people weren't just like, oh, I don't listen to techno.
Right.
And at the same time as that was happening, that was the transition between old school marketing and the social media thing. It was right.
That was all.
It was
brand
right
new.
as Facebook was being made public, and so the beginning of that band, we were doing just word of mouth and like texting people about shows and
hand-to-hand
flyers
stuff.
and all that. And by the end of it, like that shit was dead.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you were right in the middle of that as the world changed.
Yeah,
And
it
had to
happened really
evolve
fast.
and adapt with that. Yeah. Believe it or not, kids, for you young people out there that are listening, there was a time before Twitter, before Snapchat, before Instagram, before even Facebook. There was a time when Facebook did not exist, and you had to do everything manual. You know, you had to make phone calls and post flyers and
We had a MySpace. We did have MySpace.
wow.
But it was more, people would be like, hey, let's do
Did you have glitter filters? Did your cursor turn into a magic wand?
I don't remember any fucking glitter filters and shit like that.
Do you
but
remember when MySpace just really nosedive because all those pages got so garbage? Like there was so much crap on them. They would take forever to load, and eventually people just went, fuck this.
Yeah, that was when Facebook was like, hey, come to our shiny new playground.
I remember when Facebook first started, one of the things people liked the most about it was that the interface was so clean and simple because they had just gotten so much trash thrown into their eyes by
It's
MySpace.
still one of their biggest strong points, as much as I dislike using it.
Well, but it's a tool. It's a tool. You know,
Yeah.
It's a necessary tool, like a phone, like making phone calls.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Well,
likes
it
to
was
make
a
phone
necessary tool. It still is, but the functionality, I feel like they take away so much functionality. Like with the whole advertising thing and when the algorithms started changing and the page.
Basically, when they added the right side of the page, because the ads and targeted advertising and crap like that initially wasn't on there.
Yeah.
And that's what people liked about it. So yeah,
I'm talking about when they destroyed the organic reach, and I feel like there's like tiny subtle things they've done to make it like that just make our jobs much harder. Like when you're signed into your artist page instead of your personal page, and you try to like tag friends or people involved with whatever you're posting, and it's like it's a total shit show. Like
yes,
it's always like, man, why do I have to go through all these different steps to do this one little thing?
All right. Okay, apparently it's break time. So we're going to take a little pause. Maybe try to send the vibe in a different direction. And we'll be right back, guys. Hang tight. All right, we're back.
Yo.
And that was definitely a fun break. Hopefully we didn't take it too far. If anybody's listened to last week's episode, they know that we definitely can do that, have done that, and will probably do that again. But so we were talking about how the social media game kind of affected your band, Vibrant Iris.
Yeah, just basically as we grew as a band during the course of that transition, after which it wasn't the same. So people coming up.
Was it because opportunities actually seemed like they were becoming a reality, and that sort of changed the way people were viewing what you guys were doing artistically? Or, because I know that does happen sometimes where some people are in it for the art, and once opportunities start to kind of rear their ugly heads, there's certain people who are start to view it more of as a financial endeavor or a way that they, it kind of changes their perspective on it.
Right. Well, to me, it's always a balance. I have no problem with the financial side of it, of art in that case.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like people should value what they're doing, and the only way to sustain what you're doing is to value yourself.
Right. And be compensated for what you're doing.
Exactly.
Right? But
it was more a case, I think, of all of a sudden having a whole new audience of people you might not necessarily be friends with, but all of a sudden the network is so much bigger and so many more people putting their art and their voices out there, to where it's kind of a prelude to the echo chamber effect, even for music.
I mean, are we talking egos? Are we talking...
Maybe there's a little bit of that, but I'm talking about...
Well, like, for example, I mean, to take it sort of way, way, way back, the Doors. I know initially they were sort of a collective, a very sort of socialist thing where it was a all for one, we're all equal partners type thing. And as the band's popularity progressed, people got in Jim Morrison's ear and were like, no, you're the guy, you're the main thing, you're what matters. And I'm pretty sure that caused some fractions in the band where some people felt like the attention wasn't maybe being, or the credit wasn't being equally distributed.
Right.
And then there's questions of money and, you know what I mean? Like there's the sort of there's a real balance that a frontman or like a lead guitarist or like a main performer has to, a tightrope they have to walk to not feel like they're getting the short shrift,
Right.
Because they do become sort of the face of the thing, but without recognizing that without the rest of the guys, they don't have anything. It's really easy to sort of let yourself get away with yourself.
Yeah, it's a balance, person to person.
Black Sabbath had a really good relationship with that particular tightrope in that they recognized that the bass player and the drummer were just as important as the guitarist and the singer. You know what I mean?
Right.
They were a quartet, and when you saw that thing collapse was when Ozzy Osbourne sort of went off the rails. And as the front man, that seems like being the front man is a really risky place to be if you don't keep yourself in check.
Yeah.
Because you can blow up everything, and historically you've seen it time and time again. So I don't know how much of that was kind of a weird tangent, but I don't know if that had anything to do with what happened with Vibrant Iris, but suffice it to say that eventually that project did kind of come to an end, right?
It did, yes.
And you guys had...
It was a mix of things.
You guys had good momentum at the time.
We did.
Too.
We had great momentum going. We had done 180 to 200 shows, I think, over the course of 4 or 5 years, and we're just starting to get...
And doing festivals and stuff,
bookings,
right?
And venues opening for really great acts. We opened the main stage at Earth Dance in 2011. Did some shows with Dead Prez, Hieroglyphics.
That's right, I remember that.
The first show we ever did was with Abstract Rude, which is kind of a really cool thing for me.
Did you guys do something with like Andre Nicotina?
We did a Southern California tour with Andre Nicotina.
Right, I mean
that was interesting.
Yes, I mean stuff was really starting to like pop off.
Yeah,
but
part of that, what it came down to, is we didn't communicate on the structure of our group as a business.
Right,
which it's very important. Even if you're not doing it for money, it's important to have a clear understanding between everybody on their roles and on the financial side.
Right, and their level of commitment.
Exactly.
How much sort of everybody's going to be expected to contribute.
Exactly.
Because that will absolutely lead to resentments. If 3 guys feel like they're putting in 100%, and there's the one dude who's kind of phoning it in, shit talk happens, man.
Or if there's one dude who's putting in all the work and the 3 people are...
Yeah, and they feel like they're carrying everybody. Yeah,
it might not be anyone's fault either, regardless. It's just a lack of communication.
That is a worst case scenario, though. Because if the one guy's putting in all the work and really sort of carrying all the weight and eventually starts to regret it, as soon as that person stops, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah. But the cool thing about that is we stopped doing shows together. All 4 of us are still friends and
all still active musicians.
And still active musicians doing different
great.
projects.
Sure. But
the hard thing was after that, I had not put in any time into a solo project, my Low Grit project. So I essentially started that from the ground up. At that point,
wasn't related
in 2012
to Vibrant Iris had completely been put on the back burner. So the band decides to go their separate ways. And now you're at a place where you have to figure out, where do I go now?
Exactly.
And how does that look? How does that work out?
I mean, it's been working out good. It's been a slow process for sure.
Oh yeah,
but
and I know the end results have been really good. But I mean, like at that point when you're standing there and the all thing that you've been putting all this work into is now dissolved, how do you move forward?
Well, you kind of just have to put your head down and put in the work and put in the time. And
did it feel like starting from scratch?
It did. I was already working on a ton of music that wasn't for Vibrant Iris, so it wasn't necessarily completely from scratch.
That's
but
good. Did you have anything that you had been working on for Vibrant Iris that you could, now that that had dissolved, take that and apply it to your own personal stuff? You know, did you have beats or anything like that?
I did, but I'm one of those people who writes consistently, so I always end up just writing new stuff, so I don't really form too much attachment to things that are older.
And you don't really aim it directionally when you're writing. You just kind of write from what you feel. Because like for example, with Ministry, you know, the sort of industrial metal band, which actually I think I might have even turned you onto them when you were like 10.
You did.
Or something
and
like
that was my first concert, was Ministry when I was 13.
What a fucking fantastic first concert.
Mine was fantastic.
And this has come up in the podcast before. Mine was Men at Work. You know, Land Down Under, Who Can It Be Now, the Australian band Colin Hayes, which they're a great pop band from the 80s, but
that's awesome
but
too.
It's not Ministry. But
I have you to thank for that. You had to do Men at Work so that you could get me Ministry.
Yeah, I did the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But my second concert was the Jackson 5 with Michael Jackson.
See, now I'm jealous.
So that's a pretty dope second concert. I saw Michael Jackson when he was still a person.
Yeah.
You know. So I, you know, that was a cool thing. Still, Ministry is a good one.
Ministry is great.
My syphilitic co-host Ross, his first concert was the Rolling Stones with Pearl Jam opening. I mean, what an amazing lineup to see for your first show. But
not spoiled at all.
Oh, dude, Ross has a pretty storied musical background. And down the road, that's something we're definitely going to have to get into. His lineage is musical. But what I was going to say about Ministry is when Elaine Jorgensen writes and that crew of people write songs, they can tell by the feel like, okay, this sounds like a Ministry song. This particular track is more of a Revolting Cock song. So that's who's going to record that. You know what I mean? They can tell sort of by the vibe of what they're feeling, which side project or main project it's going to go to. But they write in various different styles. Whereas you're a little more soulful. So I feel like you kind of always sort of create from the heart. And so those things can kind of go towards any project. Does that make sense? So
it does, but
maybe you, even though you wrote something with intentions of it being used in the context of Vibrant Iris, even though that wasn't there anymore, the piece was still just as valid as a solo project.
Yes and no. There is a lot of room to wiggle when it comes to what projects I can use for my solo stuff.
Well, and at the time, that was your main thing. You were just producing for yourself.
That's true, but as I did the solo thing, it developed into a situation where now I have a pretty large group of collaborators that when I make something, similar to the Ministry situation, I can make something and I know who I'm going to send the track to, or
you have an arsenal on hand.
I have an arsenal of uses.
Yeah, you have a gun closet, and you can decide which one to pull out for a specific use.
Yeah, so there's a range of female vocalists who I've been working on. I did an EP with Cherokee. Heather Christie. She's a singer from Feral Fauna,
which I've heard and have seen perform live, and she's amazing.
She's great.
Untouchable voice, great stage presence, really evocative and emotional. Yeah. That if you have a chance, can you give me the specific details? Because I don't want to fuck it up. What's the project called?
Well, the artist formerly known as Cherokee. She is going by Heather Christie now.
Okay.
I produced her first album, and this was last year. It's an 8-track mini LP called Shades of She.
To be clear, it wasn't released on an 8-track. You won't have to go and look
There's
for
8 actual tracks.
There's 8 actual tracks. You won't have to go look for an old Pinto and boost the stereo out of in order to play this thing. There are 8 individual tracks. I've heard them all. They're fantastic. And her vocals were a huge part of that. But the production, the music, and the sort of vibe and the energy that gave to it was a gigantic part of that sound. And that was all you. So, kudos for that. It was great. But anyway, what I was saying is you've kind of got an arsenal of collaborators that you can call on at any time. So when you do a beat or when you've produced a song, in your head sort of inherently, this is right for this guy, this is right for this girl would be perfect for this track. These 2 people could work together over this. And so you built a network.
That's correct. Sometimes it works like that. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I'll finish an instrumental track and I'll be like, wow, I really like this on its own. I'm going to release this on a new EP that's all instrumentals and it's going to be great. And then I'll get in the studio with someone I'm working with on a collaboration and play one of these tracks just to gauge them. And it becomes pretty apparent right away that this track's perfect for them. In which case I'll roll with that. And then it's just sort of an adaptability thing.
And do they just straight up come at you and go, hey man, that's really good. Is there any way I could throw vocals on that? Or
normally it's a sort of situation where we're already working on stuff and I've sent them a couple things. I found that if you send people music online for collaboration, it doesn't always, you have like a gray area where probably not going to be that inspiring, just getting a track on Dropbox and forcing yourself to write to whatever I sent them based on my preconceptions.
Right.
But when you get in the studio and you can sort of feel them out, you're like, actually, I think this is what their vibe is going to be. So and then once you get in the studio and start playing stuff or making stuff from scratch, you'll get a way better idea. So a lot of times when I first meet an artist, I'll send them a group of tracks to gauge their interest.
Not one specific one, but
sometimes they'll like 1 or 2 out of like 10. Maybe they
like
don't.
them all, but feel like there's only 1 or 2 that's right for them.
Yeah, maybe they like them, but they aren't inspired to write.
Don't find a place for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. But once you get together in the studio and start actually working on something, it becomes apparent pretty quick what's going to work and what doesn't. And if you guys share a spiritual connection or a working connection, collaborative connection, then these things become apparent really fast.
And do you usually feel like it happens kind of organically?
Yeah, definitely.
So you don't.
And that's the whole point of this rant, or not a rant, but
is it just sort of
you can send as many tracks as you want
back and let it happen.
Yeah. So if you start off sending tracks to people, that's not an organic thing. You're not with them. You're thinking based on your perspective what they might like. But when you're in the room with them, that's a different kind of energy that you guys are building off.
And you can just kind of feel that.
Yeah, you can feel it right away. But it doesn't stop me from sending stuff when I initially meet someone because it's a good gauge on
who you are and what your music's all about.
Yeah, exactly. And if people are still willing to come in and work with you after listening,
that's when you can kind of find out where they fit into what you're doing.
Yeah, and if they aren't feeling anything you send, if you send 10 tracks, you'll be able to deduct
that this isn't something that's going to work out
for
in the
them,
long run anyway.
For them.
Or for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you've sent stuff out to people and they've been feeling it and sent you something back and you've listened to it and went, that's not exactly what I had in mind.
That doesn't happen that much.
Really? That's cool. Well, you're so adaptive that actually doesn't surprise me. Because I mean, I know you've produced a wide range of music. And you've got a really open ear and open mind to what music is, probably based on what a broad spectrum of music you listened to when you were younger. But haven't you produced reggae artists and country artists, and you've done the whole gambit, right?
Yeah. So after doing my solo thing for a while, I did an internship at Digital Studios here in Santa Cruz.
I did want to
segueing a little bit.
Well, no, but I wanted to cover that real quick because you said when you're in the studio. And you've actually, for you, that refers to 2 different places because you work in, you work in two different realms.
Right.
Do you want to go over what those are? Or
Yes, so I'm also an audio engineer. I run a business here out of my project studio where I work with clients who come in and record their own songs for their own projects and albums. And I'm lead audio engineer at In Digital Studios on the west side of Santa Cruz. That's where I cut my teeth on the audio engineering side through an internship 3.5 years ago. And
that's where it kind of became, you got to see what the business side of the business is, right?
Yeah, I was already doing the business side I was committed, but I hadn't learned the ropes yet.
Well, I meant more in the sense of working on music that wasn't necessarily catered to your musical taste and being able to divorce yourself from that and just be professional on it and work like, this maybe isn't something that I would listen to in my free time. That doesn't mean I can't give it 100%, and being able to sort of not put yourself on top of their stuff. Let that basically more feel like to bring out the best in that artist rather than trying to put your stamp on them.
And that's exactly the role of an audio engineer,
Absolutely,
a good audio engineer.
Yeah.
You want to get out of the way and let them bring the best in them and make sure the technical sides are taken care of and that they're comfortable.
Right, exactly. To sort of bring out the most of what they want to get out of the project.
The cool thing about that for me was, as you said, working with music I might not ever want to release or produce on my own, but being able to see that process and appreciate it. And, even if it's a genre you would never do, you take that with you to your other projects.
Right. Yeah. There's going to be influence.
There's influence from everything.
Because at the end of the day, music's just music. So
exactly. It's a song by song basis.
In an artist by artist basis and a feel by feel basis. And if you've worked with specific artists on projects that weren't in your particular genre, you can respect the talent, see the style, the art in it, and maybe be open to that in other projects down the road.
Yeah.
I know for me, my musical tastes have gotten far less myopic the older I get, just from, traveling that road backwards with music. And I actually feel like that's there's almost this generational point where, I'm obviously, as your older brother, I'm a bit older than you. And I feel like my generation sort of would trace the roots of music backwards to see where things came from. Really obvious example is bands like Jane's Addiction and Sonic Youth, which are, they've been around for a long time. I would hear them reference the Velvet Underground, for example, as an inspiration. That's what led me to check those bands out.
Right.
And then, find the Velvet Underground and find references to the Stooges and the MC5. And so it's just taking me farther. And those guys were into blues, so I'm going farther
down
and farther
the rabbit
backwards. Hole. Right. But I feel like at a certain point, things kind of stopped looking backwards and started looking more forwards and not focus so much on seeing where things had come from rather than seeing where things are going. You know what I mean? I'm not really necessarily concerned about what influenced this person to get to this point. I'm more looking forward to who they're going to influence and where this music's going to go in the future.
Yeah.
And at this point in time in the producer's chair, I feel like that's kind of where you sit, to see what's going to be happening and how can I, help artists that I'm working with move in that direction. I mean, do you agree or do you feel like you do?
Totally.
There is a big look back to the past still.
There's still a look back to the past, but for instance, I have a really hard time with the question, what artists influence you? And part of that is because I have such a varied taste and I find influence in everything. So laying it all out into 5 key artists that influence my sound is really hard to do.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't do that either. I mean, I couldn't even narrow it down to 5 genres.
Yeah.
Much less 5 artists.
Right.
It's just couldn't happen. You know, that's one of the things that I think for people who are really into music and invested into music, that whole sort of desert island, you know, which band, if you had to pick one band, that's all you could listen to for the rest of your life on this island, which would it be? For artists and musicians, that's an impossible question.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Yeah, no. If they give you an answer, they're lying.
I don't want to be on an island with one artist.
I don't want to be on an island at all.
Yeah.
I
like islands.
like
But
Hawaii or something, but yeah, like this sort of desert island.
no desert islands.
Yeah, no, I'm not picking one. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like fun.
Go find a volleyball and figure out how to get the fuck off that island.
Dude, you know what I end up doing in that case is I end up putting like these really practical parameters on it. Like, okay, well, I like this band more, but they've only got 6 albums. And we're talking about the rest of my life. So I'm going to need an artist with a broad catalog, at least 12 or 13 albums. You know what I mean? I start rationalizing the reason of my answer, and that's kind of not the point of the question. So
I could tell you one answer. My fallback, which is not necessarily true on a fully honest level, but Trent Reznor.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Because he is so varied.
Huge body of work.
And he's very adaptable.
And there's enough style differential there to where you could pick tracks depending on your mood. Everything doesn't sort of sound universal. Yeah, that's a good one for sure. And I mean,
that's more, that might not even be like songs he's done, but his character, I suppose. And
well, and he's done a lot of different projects too.
Yeah.
I mean, 9 Inch Nails is the obvious one, but he was in Pigface on their first endeavor into being sort of as far as I'm aware, the only industrial supergroup is Pigface. If there's another one, please shoot me an email, AnvilHammerHatchet@gmail.com, and let me know, because as far as I know, the supergroups, the compilation of stars working together on a project in industrial music, Pigface is the only one that I'm aware of, and they have a huge list of collaborators that have worked on that project over the years. I'm pretty sure they're not really doing it anymore, but man, those first few albums were incredible. I actually saw them at the Catalyst in downtown Santa Cruz. Pigface was in town. They were doing a record signing at this place that used to be on Pacific Avenue called Beat City Records. Fantastic dude named Beat City Bob, who used to run the place. And he was that sort of old school record store guy who you would bring something up and he would sort of look down. Oh, is this really what you're going to buy? Yeah. You didn't want to get the new Godflesh record? Well, yeah, I was kind of hoping to get that too. Maybe if you could just grab me a copy. You know what I mean? And he would steer your taste into like what was cool. I found Godflesh at Beat City Records, and they're one of my all-time favorite bands, hands down, without question. But so Pigface is doing signing at Beat City Records, and I had a friend who was friends with my girlfriend at the time. So we kind of were able to, I mean, there's no backstage, but at a signing, we were sort of with the people who were the handlers and the arrangers or whatever. So they finished doing this signing, and when they're done, you know, they're staying at some shitty hotel downtown. So they're like, what's there to do around here? What are we doing at this point between now and the show? And we went, well, you could come back to our place. We're having a party, which we at the time weren't, but rapidly organized. And so Nevik Ogre from Skinny Puppy, Chris Conley from Revolting Cocks and Finney Tribe, William Riflin from Ministry and Revolting Cocks, basically like a lot of the guys, Cliff Raven, who was this legendary bass. I mean, he was in Killing Joke. This dude's a fucking legend. These people they were bored and had nothing else to do. So they came over to our apartment and we're just chilling out, hanging out, killing time before the show. And I ended up doing mushrooms with Ogre, you know, because he was bored. And so allegedly, this is all theater of the mind, folks. None of this is necessarily real. These are all stories. But I in this fictional world that I'm creating, I ended up doing a bunch of mushrooms with Ogre from Skinny Puppy, and he's worked with KMFDM and Ministry, and I mean the guy's his own solo project, Ogre, and right around the time they started kicking in was right around the time that the show was about to start.
Awesome.
So we went and saw Pigface at the Catalyst, and that was one of the most intense shows I've ever seen. It was this hardcore sort of neo-industrial project, and I was allegedly tripping my balls off on mushrooms. It was great. That was one of my sort of brushes with greatness stories that I've got. And actually, you've got one of those too that is one. I mean, that's one of my favorites. You have a connection.
That's triggering a couple stories, actually.
Well, okay.
No, continue.
I was going to ask you a question about an anniversary that happened in the last couple of years for a little thing called the Players Club. If anybody listening remembers the Players Club. Rappin Forte, which is, that was sort of the right-hand man of this legendary Oakland rapper named Too Short. Rappin Forte was like, side by side with him on the front lines back in the day. And you have a connection to Forte, do you not?
Yeah, he's held my baby, my 8-month-old baby.
That is, wow.
Oliver's name, according to Rappin Forte, is the Big O.
The Big O. The Big O. Which is exactly what I will be referring to him as from this point on.
Yeah, which if you've met Rappin Forte, the instant you meet him, he has a nickname for you. You aren't your name. You aren't Chris.
You're whoever he wants you to be.
You're Suave K, and then you own that shit.
I think I might have to.
You might not be Suave K, but
I might have to be Suave K. I'm kind of digging. I'm feeling Suave K a little bit.
Be like, hey, my name's Jamie. Sup, Big James.
So and to him, you are Jamie never existed.
But it's in a respectful way. It's very awesome actually to watch him. He is an amazing dude. And that I've gone with him to Safeway in the middle of the night, and he will start a conversation with a random group of people in Safeway and become their friends. And it's awesome to see someone like him who is, willing to just meet people in the world and be themselves. Yeah, he doesn't hold anything back.
That's great. But I mean, that's good to. Really cool to hear.
I cut most of my teeth engineering with him, where I'd get called in to the studio at 11 o'clock at night, be like, "We have a session at 2 a.m. with Forte," and you show up at 2, and you wait an hour and a half or 2 hours, and they show up at 4, and you're recording. And it goes into the next day, and you never sleep, and
you just kind of have to basically deal with whatever's thrown at you.
Yeah, you're like, all right, I'm ready for anything. And he's got the fire still. I've seen him lay some insane verses out of nowhere within 20 or 30 minutes when he gets inspired on a beat.
Oh, I'm sure, dude. I mean, back in the 80s when Life Is, the Too Short's, I would say probably the pinnacle of his hip hop career when he was at his most famous point was when Life Is Too Short came out. Rappin Forte is on a track on that called Don't Fight the Feeling.
Oh, that's the one.
That's my favorite track on that album. A lot of people's. And he fucking kills it on that.
Yeah.
So to hear, I mean, and his flow is so like smooth and biting and wicked. I mean, he's a fucking demon on that track. And to hear that somebody who's like, that piercing in the studio and on the mic is such an awesome open dude, that's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like hearing that the singer for your favorite band is a really nice guy and likes cats. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, turns out that dude is somebody who I'd actually want to hang out with.
Yeah. He's not a pretentious dude in the least. He's very
it doesn't sound like it at all. And I know you work.
He one of the cool things he does, he works with a lot of upcoming artists too, and really pushes them and inspires them, which is something I really respect. He
Sort of tries to give back.
Yeah, like he's coming to the studio with a posse of people and varying levels of established as an artist. But yeah, they'll bring in, one of their young homies in on a track, and Forte coaches them and
tries to put them over.
Yeah, like, oh, we'll get you a verse on there. Come on, you can do this. Just write one out. Oh, I don't like this about that, but do it this way. You got this. And
just really does his best to sort of make sure that they can shine their brightest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. And I almost feel like you see that more in the genre of hip-hop than you do in a lot of other areas. Where, the guy makes it, and that doesn't mean necessarily just that he made it. That means him and his whole crew made it. So now everybody's getting a shot, because that one dude, like they'll sort of lift their people with them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where I feel like in a lot of other genres, once people, this is clearly an assumption, but I feel like in a lot of other genres, when people make it, they have a tendency to sort of leave their people behind.
It can happen.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which is too bad.
I've seen it.
But, at the same time, there's cases definitely where you can't blame people for that, because you've got hangers on and people who are sort of trying to, you
can't help everybody.
You have to be careful. And, I was speaking more in a rock thing or whatever, but the first example that pops into my mind is the MC Hammer phenomenon, where you have so many hangers on that the weight just drags you to the bottom. Guy was on top of the world, biggest artist on the planet for a minute, and ended up, flat broke because he was sort of trying to bring his people with him. And there was a lot of people who took, whether it was intentional or not, took a lot of advantage of him. And, it's just like dieting, man. You can't fucking spend more than you make,
It's a balance. You can help people help themselves, but you're not gonna.
But you don't want to carry them.
You're not gonna go out of the way to carry somebody who doesn't obviously take it seriously or give
their
a
own
fuck.
weight.
Yeah, exactly.
You can give them a boost, but you don't want. You want to be with somebody who's at least trying to pull their own weight. Yeah. But sometimes that's a hard thing to recognize.
I was with my friend Hakeem yesterday, and a music producer, Joe Solo, who produced for Macy Gray.
Okay.
And has been on a bunch of amazing projects. They did a lecture.
I love her,
at Kirby.
By the way, but the side note, I love Macy Gray.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She's a nut. I love her.
Anyways, I did video at Kirby High School for them. They did a presentation for some of their students, and one of the interesting points that Joe Solo made is that no one person is going to make you successful. That all lies on your shoulders. And if you think that any established person or entity can pull you up without you doing the work, then you are seriously confused.
Sadly mistaken.
Yes.
Even, somebody is like high profile and who clearly has a huge machine and organization around him, like Justin Bieber, for example. That's clearly, he's not a person, he's a corporation. And there's a big infrastructure around that dude to keep that train moving forward. Right. But that being said, he's still doing work. You know what I mean? Like, no matter how many people are sort of pushing him forward, without him at least putting the effort in to create, all that shit just goes away.
That guy probably works harder than either one of us.
Oh, he definitely works harder than me. I'm a lazy motherfucker. I hate working. But you know what I mean? That you say whether you like him as an artist, whether you like him as a musician, whether you
can't knock his hustle.
Yeah, he is doing the work that is allowing that machine to push him forward.
And even if Justin Bieber heard your music because you sent him a link on the internet and he wanted to help you out, he probably isn't even capable of helping you. Even with that machine.
Does he even get access to the internet without somebody, like some handler, filtering everything he sees?
Right.
Who knows? Which is kind of ironic because the way he got discovered is by Usher seeing him on YouTube. So, you know what I mean? What I mean? That's where he came from. And the kid he plays instruments. I don't know if he writes his own songs at this point, but in the pop world today, who does? I'm pretty sure most of the songs you hear in the pop world are written by ghostwriters, you know?
Yeah, but that's one of those things that maybe it happened in the 90s where it became kind of taboo to do songs that you didn't write by yourself. But traditionally, music has always been about collaboration. That's part of the collaborative process.
Well,
what
was the area in New York? I mean, I think it was probably in the like 40s and 50s. There was the Tin Pan Alley area of New York where guys would, I mean, their 40-hour-a-week full-time job was to go to an office building and sit down in front of either, paper to write down notes or sit in front of a piano and crank out pop songs.
Yeah.
And then they would figure out, okay, well, this song has this feel and that fits with this artist. And so they would assign, none of those people wrote their own songs back then.
But it was respected. Nowadays, you say ghostwrite, and it's a naughty word, but it's actually always been part of the music business.
It sounds like there's no artistic integrity.
Yeah, but there is. It just depends on your perspective, because what it is, it's a collaboration. You have someone who creates a song, and you find the right person to sing that song. The person who wrote that song, the person who wrote that song isn't the right person to sing it, and that happens a lot where people are so intent on singing their own song, but they're not the right person for it. And then they record all originals where they're singing everything, and people don't give a fuck because they're not necessarily, they could be in some cases.
There's a difference between the message and the messenger, and the two are not always mutually exclusive.
Exactly.
Occasionally, the message is good, but that person is not the right messenger.
Yeah.
And that's a sort of new phenomena. I mean, even looking at the blues back in the day, you've got a tradition of people sort of doing the same handfuls of songs, blues standards or whatever. And then you see this transcontinental influence, and then you've got bands like Led Zeppelin or people like Eric Clapton who are doing these sort of electrified, Europeanized covers of these blues standards. A lot of the early Stones records and Beatles records were just like their sort of bastardized versions of blues covers, and that was okay. That was the way, because blues artists did it too.
Yeah.
Howlin' Wolf and John Lee Hooker and Muddy Waters depending on whatever the given night was, they would be doing the same songs, because they were standards,
right?
And at a certain point, Woody Guthrie, some of the folk guys who were writing original songs because there was a specific message that they were trying to get across. Maybe that's where it started, where sort of the artistic integrity meant everything about the song came specifically from you.
Yeah. And that's true too.
Yeah. There's validity to both.
Yeah.
There's absolutely validity to both.
It's also, as far as the ghostwriting thing, or I should just say songwriting, sometimes the message transcends who's singing it, and I feel like bringing on a new voice to tell that story only validates the message even more. If you're not the only one who can sing it, and another person can take that song and make it their own,
make it better, if they've got a better voice, if they're better players.
And that happens again, like 20 years down the line, someone does a cover song and they deliver it in a better way.
That's hilarious, because I was just about to bring up covers, because it's the same thing, Essentially, if you're doing a cover song, then your band who performed it originally was your ghostwriter.
Exactly.
And God, I don't know how they managed to come up every single show, but I cannot seem to get through an hour and a half with bringing up Metallica.
Yeah.
And, Metallica's, some of their biggest hits have been Turn the Page was a cover. Bread Fan was a cover. They've done a lot. They did a whole album full of covers by Budgie and Diamond Head. And so those were hits. Mm-hmm. So aren't those original artists technically they're ghostwriters for those songs?
Yeah, technically.
And if so, does having a ghostwriter automatically make a song shitty? Because if so, then we've got a lot of shitty Metallica songs that people really like.
No.
So you know what I mean?
I think there is the other side of this. I see it in the DJ world a lot, where there is more validity to it, is where a person's whole career is based on the false misrepresentation of their art, where a DJ producer, for instance, who is an original artist, and
Are we talking about studio DJs or club DJs?
I'm talking about club DJs.
Okay, that's it.
Club DJs.
Let me be clear real quick for everybody listening. Those two things are very different.
Very different. And as far as club DJs go, you have some of those mega club DJs, superstars, by
Steve Aoki, DJ Khalid. That's a
yeah,
Oh.
DJ Khalid. But I'm sure DJ Khalid makes his own stuff. I'm not 100% sure. But you have some of these guys who are superstars, and
I'm not knocking those guys' hustle, by the way.
no, I'm not
so-
knocking anybody. But a lot of the fans think that they're doing everything and that they're original artists, when some of them, maybe not the ones we mentioned by name,
Right.
they just pay fees to ghostwriters to make tracks for them to put their name on it.
Right.
And
Yeah, oh, yeah,
that
definitely.
becomes a different thing, I think.
Oh, no,
Because
I
they're
agree.
not actually singing their own, they're not doing their own interpretation of someone else's song. They're pressing play.
They're literally just
They're
loading
literally-
it into a playlist.
Yeah.
You
At
know,
that point, it's not even a
yeah,
emotional thing. It's
it's one thing if you're a musician and a producer and you're recording these tracks, original tracks, then loading into a playlist so you can perform it live or, play it live or whatever. That has a little more validity because you did make the material. But at a certain point, you're literally just dropping stuff into a playlist and pressing play.
yeah. And
And-
people are there's assumptions that they did everything.
That they
Like,
did the
oh, this
work.
music's great. I did the work. But
at what point, I mean, where's the line? The people there are having fun. They're enjoying the vibe. Maybe the guy behind the laptop cultivated the track order, and that's leading to the vibe.
and that's true. That's
maybe
something.
his style on the mic is what's getting people bumped up, and that's his artistic contribution. Is being, it's not so much about the music; it's about being sort of the hype man. I mean,
and that's what it is about.
does Flavor
But
Flav,
it's the
does
misre-
Flavor Flav have talent as the hype man? Fuck yeah. He was just as important as anybody else in
Yep.
Public Enemy. So, you know what I mean? I'm saying that kind of is where the line of like,
It's the misrepresentation that gets people pissed off about it.
right.
And I think it's different in the DJ world as far as
And most, to be fair, most of those guys are decent enough to where they're not claiming phony shit.
No.
They never come out and say, this is my all original music. They just don't address it at all.
yeah.
But if somebody asks, like, no, I didn't make any of those tracks, but I
Well,
put the
technically,
order,
if you're ghostwriting and someone's paying you flat, like a flat fee for that track for ownership, you do have claim, like it is your track and you wrote it because you paid someone to write it for
Right,
you. So they
could
were
say
writing in my stead,
that. Right, exactly. Yeah.
and that's where the confusion comes in.
But to my knowledge,
But like if it was
those guys
Christi- if it
don't
was
do that.
if it was someone like Britney Spears or something, like you can look at the liner notes of the album and be like, this
Written
song
by-
was written by.
Yeah, X dude.
That's different than
The
ghostwriting.
guy from Tin Pan Alley.
That's
who-
actually a lot different than ghostwriting.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of sort of the celebrity biographies, like the Keith Richards biography or the Ozzy Osbourne biography, or whatever. And I fucking love those things. Speaking of Marilyn Manson, like to take it back to where we were earlier, his biography is great. It's a great read.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'll try and dig you up my copy of it or whatever, or maybe get it in an audiobook. I wonder if he reads his own audiobook.
I bet he does all weird.
That would be
Candlelight.
fantastic.
Cocaine.
Fuck
strippers.
yeah. One would hope. But a lot of those guys who do release those biographies, they're not sitting in front of an old school typewriter banging out their notes or what. They're talking to somebody who
Is actually writing it for
is
them.
writing it down, right? And a lot of times those guys don't get a byline,
Yeah.
and that's, like you said, it's perfectly legal because
Yeah.
they signed a deal,
And when I was talking about the ghostwriting, I don't personally have anything wrong with it.
I don't-
But
yeah,
it is it's one of those
like
things.
you said specifically, the phenomena of people having a problem with is very new.
Yeah.
Relative to music. Go back to Shakespeare.
Right.
The bards would play the standards. What orchestras, classical music is generally performed by people who did not write any of that music.
And jazz.
They're playing sheet music. Right. Well, jazz standards.
Yeah, jazz standards.
And that was kind of maybe in the free jazz movement, that's sort of similar as to what we've got going on with singer-songwriters now, is that with free jazz, sort of playing the standards was kind of looked down upon as a lesser artistic endeavor based more on technical proficiency than creativity. And that's absolutely what we've got going on with the sort of diminishment of the ghostwriter.
I think it's more important to focus on the music and the song itself and how it affects you emotionally, and not worry about the other aspects.
Yeah, don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, exactly.
Just enjoy the message.
Exactly.
That. Yeah, I mean, it's something that sort of, I guess, artistically in all, whether it's visual media, writers, music, whatever, that's sort of been a back and forth. An area of contingency probably as old as art. Who knows? But speaking of art, one place where you can find this little creative project, this podcast that we do, that we throw ideas out there and see what sticks. You can go to AnvilHammerHatchet.com. If you want us to talk about anything, contact us at AnvilHammerHatchet@gmail.com. We'll answer questions. We'll cover topics. Got a couple in the chamber, actually, that people have asked to get the main stable of hosts to get our feedback on. SoundCloud is, I'm going to be shooting out social media links today, but SoundCloud's a great place to find just sort of the pocket of all of our social media links. And what's the best ways for people to contact you? You want to just plug your...
Yeah, I'll do some plugs for sure. So you can find most of my contact information and discography and some of the work I've done at www.lowgrit.com.
That's LOWGRITT.
Correct.
.com.
That's the one. I'm also same handle. Hit me on Instagram, on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and all that good stuff.
And I'm assuming, are you on iTunes?
I'm on iTunes. I have a number of albums and singles available on iTunes.
Yeah,
as well as Spotify. You can hit Spotify too.
You've been really prolific over the years, so I'd imagine there's...
I've only put out maybe 5% of what I've written.
Oh, yeah. No, between what you've released and what you've written, I know there's a large disparity, but at least what I'm just speaking of the stuff you have released is a lot. So, but are there links to all the different areas just specifically on lowgrit.com?
So lowgrit.com has all my solo music projects. So that's my discography, everything I've put out. It has live video. It has my links to contact me as an audio engineer to record some of your projects. I have a page of past work of other clients' music that I've worked on, as well as the standard bio contact sections.
Photos. Funny stuff.
Maybe I need more funny stuff. There's not as much funny stuff, but it also has my show schedule too.
Oh yeah, and that's important too.
I'm playing
live dates.
Wormhole Wednesday in Oakland, the end of March, I believe the 28th of March.
Dude, this thing goes by so quick. There's this whole area that I wanted to talk. I mean, you've played internationally. You've played all over the world, and I wanted to get into that with you. I mean, you know, Costa Rica. You've been everywhere, and I really wanted to get into it with you when we just fucking ran out of time. So, I mean, we're going to have to do this again.
We will.
Whether it's just me and you again, or whether, I'd love to get you in with the boys, too. Because, I mean, it would be hilarious and fun. And,
yeah, it'd be fun, except you might not be able to keep me and Chris away from politics, and we might eat each other to death.
Hey, man, I got a bat. As soon as we get near politics, I start swinging.
Yeah, so, swinging around.
But, yeah, I mean, we need to do this again. I would be more concerned about if I get you in there with the other guys, what's going to happen on the fucking break. Because shit can get real messy real quick. But we'll keep it in. But we definitely need to do this again because we really just scratched the surface I mean, this was a bare bones type thing.
Yeah.
So,
I will make one more shameless plug.
Please.
So the next project I'm releasing as a full unit is a untitled album with my collaborator Cat Factor, female singer from Santa Cruz. One of my favorite projects I've worked on so far. We got about 5 or 6 tracks we're working on. She's a guest artist on Everyman's track New Beatniks that we were about to play.
That was the song that we did our intro with. That's the song, and
you'll hear more of it in a minute.
Yeah,
here.
I'm going to sign out with a little sample of that. So, again, you guys at this point, all our social media. We'll be posting links to everything. We'll be posting links to my brother Logan's social media. I'm not going to let you get out of here completely just being low grit. You still got to be my brother too. But so we'll post all that stuff. But what we're really what I wanted to end with is an example of some of the work that this amazing kid next to me has done. He's brilliant. He's one of my fucking heroes, and I could not be more proud of him. So this song's called New Beatniks, featuring Cat Factor, by the artist
Everyman,
produced by Low Grit. So, yeah, we're going to sign out. We'll see you next week. Hopefully, the boys will heal up. All the doctors will clear them to go. The antibiotics will kick in.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Remember, people, creams and ointments, lots of antibiotics. Syphilis is real. Love you fuckers. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Logan, so much for doing this, man. It was awesome.
On the road again like Kerouac Jack. Hit it in the nick of time, will sound so fat. I used to be a fat kid, but now I just rap. Be the new beat mix, lay back on the track. I teach a horse new tricks and lead a dog to water. You can do or do not. Leave the man to give the orders. You can quit or don't. Give up or be gun ho. Slow down, come clean, blaze trails. This so we game crushing with the horn or percussion. Talk the talk, walk the walk. Bomb beats begin to bust in. High five, low grip. We drop the rocket spot. Join the jamboree, then we drop it like it's hot. Game crushing with the horn or percussion. Walk the walk, wrong beats begin to bust in. Every man, yeah, we drop the rocket spot. Join the jamboree, then we drop it like it's hot.
Summertime, and we're making it. Drop it like it's hot. Summertime, and we're making it.
The sun sets, then it rises. New horizons, electric relaxation and adventure. Come on, try from proximities close to close encounters from the far side. That's alright. My tribe's vibe is impeccable.